Hi. Today we have something a little bit different. Today is something a bit unusual. Not my typical thing. Oh, are you looking at that over there? As you can see, it is a can of worms. I'll be opening this up a little bit later. So what is different today is that I am talking about a graphic novel, Fun Home, by the author Alison Bechdel, who wrote and drew the pictures. This graphic novel has won all kinds of awards because people like it. In this groundbreaking, best-selling graphic memoir, Alison Bechdel charts her fraught relationship with her late father. In her hands, personal history becomes a work of amazing subtlety and power, written with controlled force, and enlivened with humor, rich literary allusion, and heart-breaking detail. The details will break your heart. The life of Alison Bechdel, who grows up with quite a strict father who has an unusual hobby. He likes to restore their old house. That really figures very heavily in chapter 1, this amazing house restoration that he goes to great lengths to achieve. Even though he lives in a very tiny American town where nobody appreciates his unbelievable efforts in this restoration. They all just look at him as a bit cracked. It's very hard to speak about this without giving away the secrets. In every single chapter, in all 7 of the chapters, she highlights, if not even stresses, the very key moments of the story. All right, let me just tell you what happens. There's a young girl. She's going to grow up and she will become a lesbian. Her father is now dead, and a lot of people think that he might have committed suicide, Alison being one of them. There is some question, it's not proven, but it looks very much like suicide. And he was secretly a gay man. And he did some dark, dirty stuff way back when with some teenage boys. Yes. That probably sounds like I'm giving away the whole story. Probably these things come at the end, right? Chapter 6, chapter 7, those are the suspenseful moments. Did he, didn't he, is she, isn't she? But no, let me give you a chapters 1 through 7 breakdown. Alison, even though in chapter 1 she's just a young girl, maybe 8 years old, is going to grow up and become a lesbian. You should not think otherwise, because she is surely going to become a lesbian. I strongly think Alison does not like suspense, or she does not believe in it, or she is wholeheartedly against it, because some of these moments could have been quite good at the end. Alison, even though she's a child in chapter 1, she's going to grow up and become a lesbian. Even though that's not pertinent to the story at this point, don't forget it, because she wants you to know that she grows up to become a lesbian. Her father is secretly a gay man. Even though that could be something fun and suspenseful for the later chapters, she wants you to know in chapter 1 that he is secretly a gay man with a wife and 3 children. He's recently dead, and even though it might be fun to have saved it for the end of the book, she wants you to know in chapter 1 that maybe it was a suicide. Probably. In her mind, she thinks it was definitely a suicide, but there's some question about that. If there is any suspense in the novel, it is that one unanswered question. And her father, being secretly gay, at some point in the dark history, he was fooling around with some teenage boys. That dirty little incident was covered up. And even though that would have made some really good suspense towards the end of the novel, she wants you to know in chapter 1. Chapters 2 through 7 is that scenario repeated 6 more times. She's a lesbian. Father's a secret gay, had some dirty business in the past. He's dead now, and maybe it was a suicide. Chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Every single chapter. And she doesn't even really go for it with another woman until the very end of the novel. For some reason, she needs to tell us constantly through every single chapter. Page 214. Got some dirty stuff on 214. It's almost like she had an idea that she wanted to save it for the end, that she also wanted to have it in the beginning as well. This novel was a little bit frustrating to read because of that. There were no secrets and there were no questions, even just a little bit of subtlety. Like on page 16 and 17, page 16, he used his skillful artifice not to make things, but to make things appear to be what they were not. That is to say, impeccable. He appeared to be an ideal husband and father, for example. But would an ideal husband and father have sex with teenage boys? Page 17. Strange that she wants to give you all of the information in every chapter. Perhaps that is her way of telling her story, her memoir, that she's looking back at her life as a child, and she is commenting on her life as an adult as she is writing and drawing this book. So that my criticism that it could have been more suspenseful, well, why should a memoir be suspenseful? Okay, all right, I see that. You don't need, to make your life more dramatic or suspenseful than it is naturally, right? So I found this to be quite a frustrating read because of the constant reiteration of these, well, what could have been bombshells towards the end. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. I like the big surprises close to the end because that's the way you do it. The artwork it's okay. I don't see that people can really be very sort of stylishly done, but not all the time. Look at that guy there. Can you see that guy? And then there, that very two-dimensional drawing of that same guy. That's really not very good, is it? A little bit lower down, her mother. That looks okay. This one panel right here really disturbed me. All right, the can of worms. Let's open it up now. This question, do you think that graphic novels should be considered literature? Is there a case for these graphic novels to be considered literature and not simply glorified comic books? I say no. Graphic novels are glorified comic books and they are not literature. I feel the same way about Mouse that most people do. I think it is an outstanding achievement. I think it really makes an enormous tragedy a lot more relatable and understandable for perhaps the lazy reader or the lazy historian. But I do not consider it literature because of the pictures. Pictures are excellent, but I don't think you can have a picture book and call it literature. My first reasoning in this is that I'll ask you this question and ask it to yourself honestly. If you removed all of the pictures, would you still read that book if it was just the text? Because while I was reading this, I was amazed at the simplicity of the text. Now, I think there's a good reason for that. You don't want to make such outstandingly grammatical, colorful sentences because then stealing the limelight away from the artwork. The sentences are written very simply, very basic, simple sentences. The writing is not particularly creative. It's very straightforward. So just think about that. If you took out all the pictures, would you still read that book in its mere text format? Can't we just admit that comic books and picture books are something we fondly remember from childhood? Opening up a book, seeing the colorful, lively pictures, it inspired the imagination. I remember when I was a little boy, I think it was grade 4, and we got a book and I flipped through it and there were no pictures. And I just remembered how awful that felt. Like, oh, I've come to the age where the books don't have pictures anymore. And literature it's all up here. It's all your own imagining. You have to do it, especially some of the best literature, like, it's always my go-to example, but As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. So much of it comes from your own effort to imagine what is taking place in this short novel. So that's my little can of worms for today. I don't think graphic novels can qualify for literature because of the pictures. It's too easy. You are not using your imagination. It's right there in front of you. It might be good, it might be wonderful, it might be culturally valuable, but it is not literature. It's just not the same thing. Checkers and chess, you play them on the same board, but they are not the same game. So that is the book review. Do I recommend it? No. I want to recommend highbrow literature. When it comes to literature, I am an absolute perfect snob. There's literature and there's everything else, and that everything else is shit. And this literature up here is all that I am concerned with in the world. All right. perhaps you're out there shrugging your shoulders and saying, Grant, you are beating a dead horse in perpetuity. We all know and we all agree that graphic novels are not literature. You don't need to keep rambling on and on about it. Okay, I suspect that there are a lot of people out there in today's juvenile world where the comic book people have just taken over mainstream entertainment. The movies, the television shows, like we've become this generation of people drowning in this really silly and infantile medium. I did read comic books. I used to do. And then I went to Europe and there were no comic books. And so I thought, well, that comic book life of mine that I used to have is over now. Now I have a European life and there are no comic books. There was so much else to do, I hardly missed it. When I came back to Canada, I went to a comic book store. Everything was wildly expensive, and what can you do? If you haven't seen a comic book for 16 years, you don't want to start again. And now to see middle-aged men with big beer bellies and, bald heads walking around with Captain America t-shirts, it's the dumbest shit about North America, I have to say. It is the stupidest, worst thing happening in society today in terms of childishness. I suppose it's always been like that, right? Those people who say, I just want to turn my brain off. I don't want to think. I just want to go and be entertained. I just want to see the special effects. Well, fuck off then.